everyone, and welcome
Take two.
to another Photo Mishmash. I'm Christina.
And I'm Toby.
And this is episode 44, and hopefully you can hear us this time.
Mere slap. Yep, everything sounds good in this, and again, we just restarted things, and folks can hear us now. So they're happy, I'm happy. We were talking about Patreon.
That's right.
Clearly we need a little support because things are cobbled together, and I would like them to be more consistently working.
Right.
So there are rewards and perks, a mix of those two words, that you get for being a Patreon supporter, including quick access to me for your questions. And think a little bit about the value of that. When you are thinking about your next gear purchase, when you're coming up on an event that you want to photograph that you're either getting paid to or you just want to make sure you do a good job, it's important to you having somebody who can be there to give you some advice, thoughtful, careful advice. We're here, and your support helps us do that. So think about that, please. And
if you are a newsletter subscriber, you already know about this, but we have two kind of big announcements of our own internal sort of announcements to make.
that we're sticking in the sponsor section.
That's right. The first one
Or the beginning.
is we have a brand new website, which is really exciting. We've been working hard trying to put it together, and we're still working on it, so we definitely encourage you guys to go check it out and give us any feedback that you might have. We want to do everything with you guys in mind, so we really, really care about what you guys have to say.
And I just turned Christina's mic on. Sorry.
Okay.
This thing starts up every time. We had to just restart it several times. Sorry. Yes, you can get to the new website. Well, it's really easy.
That's right.
Photorec.tv. PHOTOREC.tv. There's a link right down below this video to that. And the show notes are there. And /shop is there.
That's right.
Photorec.tv/shop. Now, the one thing in the shop we're really excited about, the only thing right now, there's going to be more coming, is a workshop. And the first one is happening in Seattle.
That's right. And it's going to happen the first weekend in April.
You don't remember the date, do you? It's April 4th.
I was correct.
Oh, sorry. I did. Okay.
The first weekend in April, and we hope to see you guys there. I believe we are offering a special price of $200 until Sunday at midnight. After that, the price goes up to $250. So if you think you might be interested in going, this weekend is the best time to sign up, and we'll send out a reminder on Sunday. Just in case you kind of want to think on it. So.
Right. What do you get for that money? You get a full day hands-on workshop with Christina and I in this cool little studio in downtown Seattle. We are going to start around 10 and go all the way till 5.
We'll have a lunch break.
Have a lunch break, optional dinner fun discussion meeting. But we're going to take you from the basics, being kind of nervous about using your camera, or maybe you feel pretty comfortable using your camera, but you want to take it to the next step. We're going to be small enough, about 20 folks, we hope, that there's going to be lots of time for answers and personal working together to get you more confident with your camera. On that shop page is kind of a general outline of what we're going to be covering, and I invite you to take a look at it. Even if you're nowhere near Seattle, go ahead and take a look at it anyway. And let us know. I said this in the newsletter. Where would you like future workshops to be held? We're somewhat flexible and willing to travel. And we've gotten some great feedback we've heard from folks in Boston, DC. Those are very doable and likely to happen this year. And then some further ones out as well. So throw it in the comments right now, although that disappears. And so if we don't see it right now, best is to shoot us a message on Facebook or Twitter or newsletter that says, I think your next workshop should be in...
Yep.
And it's exciting, and people have already signed up for the Seattle workshop, so
That's
it's
right.
really exciting.
There are 50
You put
spots
things out there
left.
and you think, maybe nobody will actually show up, sign up. But people are starting to.
Yeah, so don't delay and go ahead and book.
Take advantage of the savings.
Yep.
And take advantage
reserve
of our
your spot.
knowledge.
Anyway, moving on. Weekend review. we had a new photo critique video released this week, and it had a little bit of a bonus
I wasn't sure what you were going to say there.
extra. What could I possibly say?
I thought you were going to say it had a little bit of a boner. I'm sorry. You know what? This is what happens when you stay up really late reading about camera specs obsessively, trying to put together intelligent things to say, and then not being able to take a nap today.
You think of boners. That's what happens.
I just thought that's what you were going to say.
Anyway.
I'm really sorry that I took this podcast in that direction now.
Yeah. So it had bonus video of us going through all of the submissions and sort of talking through why and why not we decided to
Did you say that it was an assignment critique?
It was an assignment. I didn't say that, but it was an assignment critique. Yep. And the most popular reason why we rejected photos was because they didn't fall within the assignment theme, or they did, but it wasn't obvious, and we had to go to the title and the name of the file to sort of be able to tell what the image was about. So that is pretty basic criteria that we will be taking into account of future critiques, so think about that if you are going to submit. The theme should be very, very clear. But anyway, you should go check it out. You know, we always seem to have something new to say and some new things to go over, so definitely encourage you to go watch that video at some point.
Yes. And there is, so show notes are over at photorec.tv under the podcast listing, and right below this video should get you all to that. I'm very happy about that because it's got all the links you can look at while we're talking through this stuff, including the fact that the February assignment is shadow play. Interpret that as you wish. That is due towards the end of February. The date's on there. Right now, there is both a submission spot for the assignment and for the general critique. The next general critique will be out next week, so I think I'm asking for those to be submitted by Monday. And truthfully, you know, the ratio of the percentage of people that got critiqued in the assignment was very high because less people participate in the assignment. So give it a shot. Shadow play. Have fun with it. Let's move on because we got a late start and you have a phone call.
That's right. So we asked you guys to vote on which tripod leg
Let's spend about
should
15
get.
seconds on this. You jokers all voted for hot pink. Now, when I posted, I was thinking that it was going to be this, and that's kind of exciting. But then I remembered, well, no, I don't need a whole top part. I just need this part. And I got hot pink because that's what you voted. 37% said hot pink. No, I can tell who voted for this. I've got you on my list now. But it feels silly because it is, from a distance, you can't even tell. You know, it's just the little edgings.
Yeah.
But I've got a new tripod. It cost me $20. They also sent along the pan knob, which had fallen out as well.
That's
and
right.
that cost me nothing, free. So that's nice. That's not a bad deal. I will say that the guy knew. He said, well, it only takes 19 revolutions for the leg to fall out. So this clearly, he says, it happens to people backpacking a lot. The tripod will be on their back or, you know, and just kind of bump, and this rubber is grippy. So the tripod, the rubber hits the backpack and slowly turns itself off, whatever.
Yep. So that is our week in review, and we are just going to move on to all of our news and announcements for this week because there are a lot of them.
They are.
So the first is, why don't you take over? Because there's like 5 different cameras listed here, and I don't know where to start.
I'm going to share screen, which is going to be a little messy, but you can see what I'm doing right here. And you should still be able to hear as well. Okay, so Samsung released this little camera that looks a lot like the EOS M3. It also looks like the Sony A5100, and it's kind of in that class. Samsung is really interesting right now. I do still hope to get my hands on the NX1, but same thing, it's got a little 16 to 50 power lens. But what's interesting here is it does 4K. So here's another one of these little cameras like the LX100 that is capable of 4K in this tiny little package. That's pretty sweet. Look, somebody just submitted to the assignment. $7.99 pre-order. I think it comes out in about a month or so. So that's interesting. I think Samsung released another camera too, but I didn't get that one onto the list. Folks in the comments can talk about that. The Olympus EM Mark II mirrorless. Now, I'm embarrassed to say I have a review I've never published of the EM1, or sorry, EM5, no Mark II. Really liked it. That was the camera we used for a big chunk this summer, traveling. It is really nice quality, really good manual controls. I felt like it was a nice blend between kind of the Fuji's manual controls, but still a little bit more feeling like it was in the future. It's got in-body image stabilization. That's pretty big. And one of the really neat things about this new camera is this line right here. 40 megapoint. I really am tired.
Megapoints.
Megapoints. Sorry. 40 megapixels, high resolution shot. How, let me ask you, how, Christina,
What?
could a 16 megapixel camera make a 40 megapixel high resolution shot?
Wait, say that again?
How could a 16 megapixel micro mirrorless 4/3 camera make a 40 megapixel picture?
It's all an illusion.
It's not all an illusion. The EM Mark II captures 40 megapixel images using an innovative pixel shift technique. I'm pretty sure this isn't the only camera to do this. Somebody else does this too, but I don't think anybody else does it facilitated by the voice coil motor IS unit. So basically, that little in-body image stabilization that is shifting the sensor to keep image shake from happening when you're doing video or slower shutter speeds is also used to shift the sensor back and forth to basically take a little panorama inside the camera.
How much does it shift? It's got to shift a lot, right?
It shifts by 0.5 pixel steps between each shot, and it takes, it said somewhere, it takes like somewhere between 8, well, actually you should be able to figure it out. No, because there's overlap. Whew. It shifts a good bit. And it gives you a 40 megapixel shot. Now, downsides. It takes time to do this. So if there's a moving subject, it's going to be blurry across that shot, or it's going to be weird with weird artifacts. And I even wonder, like landscape. Landscape is where I would see this being used. If you've got blowing leaves and stuff, that might show up and be an issue as well. But it's really interesting. $10.99. This is a waterproof sealed camera with a really good lens selection. It's nice. It's a nice option. Got a couple new lenses. We're going to skip over those. Pentax. Oh, you Pentax shooters, we're so excited this week because we've got pretty solid confirmation that Pentax will come out with a full frame K-mount camera sometime this year. They have this kind of like teaser body that's been floating around, and it's going to be shown at CP+. Not really saying much about the specs of it yet. There's some rumors, but not much. And to go with that are some really nice lenses. The 70-200 f2.8. We love that focal length. Constant f2.8, and the 150-450, which on a crop sensor is, 225 to 675 millimeters. Nice lenses. Now, they are not cheap. The 70-200 is $2,400. No, sorry. The 70-200 is $2,200, or let's round up, $2,300, and the 150-450 is $2,400. Now, I expect good quality lenses to be a little expensive, but these don't have image stabilization in them because Pentax puts that in their camera bodies. I would have thought that would have helped them keep their price down a little bit. I think Pentax's problem is they don't have the volume, so not really. They don't. But this is nice. This is really nice. Pentax makes really good sensors, decent cameras, despite that one with the little blinky LEDs. Remember the one that was from the future?
Nope.
Okay. And they're good. It's just that small ecosystem really feels limiting to some folks, and the fact that they are going full force in here, getting a full frame, some lenses that are going to work on it, and some professional level lenses is really exciting. Jason wouldn't mind having the Pentax 645Z. Yes, it's a nice medium format. Okay. D7200, we should hear something about that. It should be announced at CP Plus. Those are pretty strong rumors that it is, but we have heard absolutely nothing about any of that right now. So that was the easy stuff, quick stuff. Oh, Gizmodo has a couple more. There is the Olympus Air, which is very much like the Sony Q system. This is this little clip-on that, I'm going to put this over here, clips onto your camera and then gives you a micro 4/3 mount on your camera that talks to your camera wirelessly. It's only coming in Japan, but it's going to be less than 300 bucks. I have to say this is pretty intriguing, especially now that I'm starting to pick up your my standard micro 4 because of the GH4. That's interesting. We've also got the Canon G3X. This is going to be a super zoom 1-inch sensor, so it's going to rival that RX10 and that FZ1000. It is going to give people a 28 to 600 millimeter zoom lens.
28 to 600.
Good response. Yes.
Holy moly.
That's a lot. Then we've got the Canon EOS M3. Turns out it's going to be Japan. I've actually heard Europe too, but not here in the US. This is Canon's really only, I don't have to say really, it is its only mirrorless camera if we're not counting the earlier versions of the M. The EOS M was released in North America. The M2 was not. Looks like the M3 was not. It is sharing the same sensor as the new Rebels, the T6i and the T3i, and that new hybrid CMOS 3 autofocus system. This is what's going to be really interesting. We need to see how good that AF is. Now, it's supposed to be 6 times better than the original EOS M. And Canon is saying that this hybrid CMOS sensor is almost as good as dual pixel. Now, I said this in my T6i, T6s video roundup this morning. We really need to know how much almost is. So, we'll see. Interestingly enough, you know, I said, why didn't they use the same sensor in these new Rebels that they did in the 7D Mark II? Why did they go to a higher amount? And then I was thinking, well, the 7D Mark II's got that dual pixel autofocus. That is baked into the sensor. So it's not like they can just take that part off and stick it in the Rebels. Well, then you say, well, why didn't they just put the dual pixel autofocus sensor into the Rebels? 2 reasons I've heard. One is that that technology is still quite expensive. And 2, I think they don't want to kill the 7. They want there to be a real reason to go to the 70D still. And this T6s takes away a lot of them, but not all of them. And dual pixel would be a big one. When I read the forums, the people that look at the T6s, they're like, why no dual pixel AF? Because they want you to buy the 70D. Okay? So we
moving on to the real stuff.
The real stuff? What's the real
Just kidding,
stuff?
not the real stuff. Just all the Canon stuff that's been announced. Starting with the first announcement, which was the 2 new 5Ds that are coming out later this year, the 5DS and the 5DSR, which have huge, I guess, significant megapixel increases. And I believe one has no anti-aliasing filter, which means you'll get super duper sharp pictures. So if you're a landscape or animal photographer, or maybe if you're photographing clothing, you don't really want to lose your anti-aliasing filter. But anyway, yes.
Why wouldn't you want to lose your anti-aliasing filter if you're photographing clothing?
Well, if losing the anti-aliasing filter means that the images will be sharper, you'll run into issues with certain fabrics and certain patterns. It's called moire, I believe that's how it's pronounced, and basically creates an optical illusion of banding in some clothing that has really small repetitive patterns. And not just in clothing, but just in parts of an image that have very small, just repetitive patterns. So that's kind of annoying, and it's really hard to get rid of. So you don't really want it in your pictures. But usually you don't run that in, you know, when you're doing like landscape photography, or mostly when you're photographing fabrics is, I think, when you really start to run into that. So anyway, let's talk about these cameras.
Well, Jason's got a great question. How are they able to add the dual pixel to the C100? You had to send your camera in, and I believe that's a great question. I don't know the answer. I know it had to go in, so I know it was hardware related. It wasn't just a firmware upgrade. So I'm not sure. Sorry, so then what did you say? That question caught my eye.
The question that I said, let's talk about those cameras?
Let's talk about those cameras, yes. All right, first question I have is, these guys aren't going to be available until June, these two cameras. Why did they announce them so far out? Well, first off, it's not that far out for pro-level cameras. They've done this in the past. There have been pretty significant gaps between, or lengths of time between when they announced and when it actually came out. Let me tell you something that's bugging me right now. Feeling a little punchy. Ken Rockwell. Ken Rockwell says,
Oh boy.
I've already put my pre-order in for the 5D Mark FSR. I think that's how he talks. Actually, I don't know. I shouldn't be like that. But that's a bold-faced lie. Nobody's taking pre-orders yet.
You know, maybe he's special. You don't know.
He is special. So I just, he's got a page up that's the 5D SR review. No, it's not a review. But it's okay. That's all right. I just think it's a little misleading to say I've already pre-ordered mine. Okay. So there's a gap of time. No one's allowed to pre-order yet, except maybe if you're Ken Rockwell. The reason why I think they pushed this announcement a little bit earlier than maybe they wanted to is because people are going to jump ship. We are probably going to see a 50 megapixel from Sony sometime in the not so distant future. We've got the D810, we've got the Sony A7R 36 megapixel, we have medium formats that are coming down in price, and people like our friend Steve, who went to medium format for a while and then came back to the Nikon D810, primarily a Canon shooter, but he wanted a really high megapixel for studio work. And Canon didn't want to lose any more people, so they're like, we got it, it's coming, here it comes. 50 megapixels, redesigned. I watched the kind of the promo video, and they feel like they took a big page from Apple's book. They use so many superlatives to describe this camera. Now, that doesn't mean, you might be able to tell from my tone that I'm not super excited about it. This is not a camera for me. That doesn't mean that it's a bad camera. I think it's going to produce some beautiful images. Some of the sample shots that are out already are gorgeous and stunning. But here's what Canon themselves are saying about, outside of the megapixels, your dynamic range and your ISO performance.
It's not going to be a huge improvement. No.
And in fact, we can make the argument the 7D Mark II, a lot of people are comparing the 7D Mark II sensor because basically that has the same kind of density or pixel pitch, if you want to get nerdy, that this 50 megapixel full frame sensor will, because that's a crop sensor, full frame. And, it's good. It's a good sensor, but it's not amazing. Dynamic range, the Canon is basically saying it's going to be about the same as the 5D Mark III. This is not the 5D Mark IV. These two cameras are not the 5D Mark IV. That is supposed to be coming later this year now, and is going to probably continue to be that more jack-of-all-trades camera.
Let's speculate for a second.
Okay.
Now that the 5DS and 5DSR have been released, and we see a huge megapixel increase, but not a significant change in sensor technology in terms of dynamic range, do you think that will come with the 5D Mark IV?
That is a great question, and that's the $100,000 question, and right now I feel like no. There was this rumor that Canon and Sony were partnering. I saw on a forum a guy was like, I'm the one who submitted that rumor, and everybody bought it. I don't know if he was telling the truth, but it turned out to be completely and 100% false. There is no partnership here. Canon said this is our sensors designed in-house. Again, we're talking in a way that makes these things sound bad. They are not bad, but Canon was for so long at the top of its game, and it clearly is not at the top. It's not at the bottom. Some of you might argue, oh, it's at the bottom. No, it's definitely not at the bottom. But it's certainly not at the top. It's somewhere in between. And when it gets really tricky is when we're talking about this ecosystem. Because people are like, oh, just ditch this Canon stuff. I get this comment from time to time and go with Nikon. I do not want to give up my 70-200 lens. That's kind of real. The 85 and the 85. Those two lenses are awesome. So when you talk about these cameras, you have to look at the bigger picture of how they're getting used and what lenses they're getting used with. And the ecosystem that Canon continues to provide is excellent. This 11-24 lens, which I'm a little blown away that it's going to be $3,000, but I think this is one of their first lenses that is made for this 50 megapixel sensor and is going to produce some amazingly stunning images.
Yep.
Yep. So there's a couple things that I wanted to just briefly mention about these 50Ds. It's 50Ds?
No,
Golly,
5D.
5D. Well, I put a 0 in there. Can somebody
50D is
fix
old
that?
school.
Old school. So Mirror Slap. That's the title of the show. Mirror Slap. We talked briefly about this last week with that video from the slow-mo guys, and this is just perfect that it's working out right now, because when you get up to these very high megapixel sensors, the slightest vibrations can really destroy the sharpness, or at least, I shouldn't say destroy the sharpness, but actually impact your image and not give you that full resolution that you want. Canon has this cool little video where they have shown this redesigned little mirror thing-mabob. It's completely different so that it is going to not, you're not going to get the audio from this guy talking. Just imagine he's talking about how amazing this new mirror mechanism is to keep the vibration down. So I just think it's really interesting. It is an important part of technology. I'm not making fun of this. This is really cool, and it's really important. There was a lot of hubbub around the Sony a7R and its really loud shutter causing basically vibration with that 36 megapixel camera too. It's unclear to me if it ever really was an issue, or it's one of those things that the internet latches onto like piranha on a wounded cow in the river. So yes, so that's one thing that's very cool. Other things that are cool is in-body time-lapse conversion to movie. We were just talking about this with the GH4 and the GoPro and something else, some other camera last week. But this camera is going to do that.
Yeah.
It does time-lapse, and then it converts it right in the camera to a movie. That's kind of neat. Better white balance tool. Now, I thought this was interesting. It's got your normal kind of auto white balance, and then it's got a, what was the term? Something like white balance. Somebody put in the chat what the term actually was. And it really emphasizes getting the whites correct, which I thought was interesting, because when we need to really get our white balance right, we just set the Kelvin, the temperature. Sorry, the temperature, right?
Yeah.
So it made me feel like this camera is somewhat marketed to those people that aren't professional photographers but have money and be like, I want to buy a 50 megapixel camera. And they go in the camera store and Canon says, here it is. And when you want your white balance to be really white, you set it on this. I just thought that was interesting.
But it depends on the conditions, doesn't it?
And what do you mean?
Like the white balance will be set based on whatever light.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So it's easier to walk around with that, you're saying?
Oh, okay. So it changes it for every light. It has really good white balance adjustment. Is what? Sorry.
On that setting, it really tries to get things white that are white.
Got it.
Okay. That's interesting. One thing is that the viewfinder is still optical, of course, but it has a lot more information and overlays in there, and cropping. So when you're shooting at the crop modes or the different aspect ratios, those are shown inside the viewfinder. So if you're shooting 1:1 square, you see that. And outside that area that's not going to be included in the picture is kind of grayed out. Thought that was interesting. And then I wanted to show you guys this. This is the difference in megapixels from the Canon 50 megapixel image. So it's like 8,000 pixels by something else. I don't remember exactly. I can tell you down here if I look at this little document dimensions thing. 8,688 pixels by 5,902 pixels. So that's what a 50 megapixel image from the Canon is going to produce, that green area. A 36 megapixel from the Sony a7R is going to be that gray area. They don't look that different, do they?
No, they don't.
I mean, now this is downsized a little bit, but the ratio here is correct. And then there is your 5D Mark III is 20-ish, 22 megapixels or something like that. And you know, when you start to look at that difference on all sides of the screen, sure, it adds up, and that's how you double your megapixels. But I tell you, people who are craving a big sensor camera or a big megapixel camera right now, I'd look hard at the Sony a7R and what they're going to come out with next, because that's an awful lot of savings there, unless, of course, you have a bunch of Canon glass, and that's important to you. So I thought that was all interesting. And then, last thing about this is...
Oh, so we didn't mention this, but if you want to know more details about both of these cameras, there is a video that you can watch.
Yeah. Well, truthfully, it's from last week. It's the rumors video. Many of you have probably watched it, but the specs were all right, and my opinions on them haven't changed at this point. So
yeah.
Yep. There's a lot of disappointment from the video side of folks with these two cameras. Mm-hmm. They have video features, but just barely.
But there's rumors that the 5D Mark IV is going to have 4K.
There are wistful rumors.
We'll see, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I see somebody mentioned Space, Tales of Wars. You know, they're going to be, what are they? 60 megabyte? No, what did I say? 80 or 60? 60 megabyte files, RAWs from the Canon 5DS and R.
That's 2/3. That's you know, three times the size of a 5D Mark III file. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, it's a lot of information in there.
Yeah.
So back to the video folks being disappointed, and hopefully the 5D Mark IV will have much more that makes us happy. But these two cameras, along with the 7D Mark II, I think are, you know, showing that Canon is interested in producing cameras targeted at very specific markets. Again, a lot of disappointment around the 7D Mark II when it was first announced, because we wanted it to be this sequel to the 70D almost, kind of like a more beefier version. More beefier.
Good grammar.
I know. And it really, I love shooting wildlife with that camera. If I was a wildlife photographer, I would just be ecstatic with that camera. Absolutely. But for other folks, it's not the best choice. So there's been a quote, Northlight Imaging, which they do good stuff about rumors and other kinds of different things, and says, the splitting of model types in the Canon DSLR range will be interesting to see from a product positioning point of view. I'm told that it's seen as a major benefit from bringing, oh sorry, I should have read the first part first. Are the days of a Canon DSLR that can do a little bit of everything numbered? It's suggested at Northlight that the splitting of camera lines will be the future of Canon's DSLR strategy. Each camera model will have a specific customer in mind. As we see the 5D line is being split two ways, we expect the same with the 1D line, or a DSLR that is focused on video first. And from Northlight, the splitting of models types in the Canon DSLR range will be interesting to see from a product positioning point of view. I'm told that it's seen as a major benefit from bringing home a lot of Canon's manufacturing and will become integral in producing cameras that are marketed more by what you can do with them.
Wesley, he asks if the launch of these cameras will impact the price of the 5D Mark III. Yeah, I don't think so either.
I really don't think so. Two reasons. One, these are so far out. Two, the 5D Mark III still remains a good all-around camera that is coveted by many, many photographers and videographers. And, you know, the price has come down almost $1,000 since it was released in 2012. And I expect that over the course of this year, we'll see a continued slight decrease, but not any faster because of this release. That's what I expect. Now, we want to talk about the T6i and S briefly. So we're going to share this slide Did it share? I hate it when it does that. This slide, this is the video that went up today, this morning, and just real quick, bring your attention to the T6i on the left, which is basically an upgrade to the T5i, and the T6s on the right, which is this camera being slipped in between this kind of entry-level Rebel and the 70D. It's got that top LCD, it's got a locking dial, and you know, in my mind, it's pretty clear to go with the T6s if you're considering these two cameras because of that top LCD, the rear command dial. Then this seems kind of crummy on Canon's part. The proximity sensor, which is the little sensor that tells when you've put the viewfinder up to your eye and turns the LCD off to save battery life and also not just be shining anything on your face, that is in the T5i has been removed in the T6i and is only in the T6s. You also get AF servo and live mode. This is another one, the manual movie mode. It's hard for me to believe, but people are saying that the T6i drops full manual control of video shooting. And if you want that, you've got to go to the T6s. But you only have to spend $100 more. So it's, you know, I know $100 isn't nothing, but when you're up at this price point, I think you're well off to spend $100. There aren't any other advantages to the T6i. It's not any smaller, it's not any lighter significantly in any way. So you spend the $100 and get it. A lot of people are asking about T6i versus 70D. Sorry, T6s versus 70D. We need to know how fast that hybrid sensor is. I said almost. And we need to know, oh, I should correct this now because I made that wrong. What is it? It's 20 point something. 24 megapixels versus 20 megapixels. We just saw how different 50 versus 36 is not. 24 versus 20, we're not talking about a difference, a huge difference in resolution. But we want to see image quality and low light performance. But the 70D really still has some key features. Weather sealing, 7 frames per second. Pentaprism, I'm skipping, I'm not going to read all of these because you can go watch my video. Pentaprism, that means a brighter viewfinder. It's one of these things where if you've only shot with the Rebels, you didn't really know that anything was different. But when you put your eye up to a pentaprism viewfinder on the 70D or up to a full frame, you're suddenly like, wow, it's a lot brighter. I can see all of my composition in even low light. It's nice. And some other features too. Again, I'm not going to read all of this because $250 more. This, I think, is less of a clear choice. It really depends on you and what type of photography you are doing. So, but T6i versus T6s, I think it's pretty clear that the T6s, and interestingly enough, the T6s is only going to be sold body only. So far, I've only seen it body only or 18 to 135.
Do you think that this might be just a pricing strategy from Canon to release a camera that is all right and then a camera that has like all of these other features for just $100 more, to kind of make people, you know, think they're getting so much more value, and they are getting a lot more value, but truthfully they want them to buy the T6.
Well, we've kind of talked about this before in pricing. I mean, this is a common kind of pricing strategy in marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you price your bottom level at a certain point, but then you give people a next level up that you know they're not going to want or go to that bottom level. I want to switch back over and, let's see, can I make this bigger before I share it? Oh, I can, that's nice. And, you know, there was a comment about the saturatedness of the bottom of Canon's camera market right now. Yes, check this out. So we come down here, they still are making the 60D, but they come down here and we've got the 6S and the 6i. No word that the T5i is going to be discontinued at this time. And that's pretty typical. It doesn't always discontinue. I know some of you out there were shooting with a T4i and it got discontinued and you felt kind of slighted by that. But you know, they don't usually get discontinued that fast. So the T5i, the SL1, haven't heard anything about the SL2 yet. The T3i is still being sold. And then we have those bare bone models, the T5 and the T3. That's a lot of cameras between this kind of like $500 and $850 price range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. That's a lot of cameras. And it will be interesting. They really need to do some cleanup here, I think, and get rid of some of these and kind of decide what their marketing strategy is. I don't have any more words of wisdom than that.
Yep.
Awkward pause.
So, unless we have any more announcements to talk about, I think we should skip our discussion for today.
Should we?
And move on to questions because it is almost 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
And I am thinking we'll probably spend about at least 20 minutes on questions.
Okay.
And discussions.
Okay.
About questions.
All right.
So if you have a question right now that you would like us to talk about, post it on the chat and we will hopefully get to it before we wrap up.
Yep. Well, why don't we, as people are starting to submit some questions, why don't we talk briefly about the Apple Photos for Mac? People already questions? You want to go?
Yeah, one question.
Okay.
Chris Wilmot wants to know, I'm from UK, what is a mason jar?
Who said there is a mason jar?
People have seen you take sips out of the mason jar, which they think that you're drinking moonshine out of there.
Oh, it's water. I'd be in bad shape on this
So you
little
think?
sleep drinking alcohol. Oh yeah, maybe I'm pretending I'm
That's
sleepy.
why you're so loopy.
No, it's just water. Canning jar. Another. What do you people in
that's right.
UK?
A jam jar.
Jam jar. A washed
Or
jam jar.
marmalade, or however you call it.
I don't like marmalade. It's just got
It's
little,
all sweet.
It's got little
and
bits
fruity.
of peel in it. Orange marmalade.
I love orange marmalade.
That's for Paddington Bear.
It's so good.
All right. I've got a tough question somebody asked. I did a lot of time lapses this last week. Oh, I wanted to show that one thing. Again, I've mentioned this before, but I wanted to mention it again because those of you who have GoPros, get yourself, and don't care about how lightweight it is, get yourself this extended battery. I literally chucked this thing out in the snow at the beginning of this week for another snow time lapse. It was 12 degrees, getting buried in the snow. It ran for 9 hours. That is awesome. How long would it have run if the extended battery was in there? I think it wouldn't have run for a third of that time. That's my estimate based on some other things that I've done with it. Also, Jason, I think it was you, Jason D., who recommended that I get in touch with, we had talked about being a little frustrated, or you had talked about being a little frustrated with the GH4, shooting, outdoors, and having trouble kind of stabilizing it and seeing if things were in focus. And we talked about Zacuto, which is a high-end maker of viewfinders and things like that sort. And Jason was like, check out these Camera guys.
It's pretty awesome.
It's really nice. I'll have a review in the next week or so. And it fits up against the viewfinder on the back of the camera, the LCD on the back of the camera, and gives you this massive viewfinder. And there's a little magnifier in here as well. It's kind of like looking into the Fuji X-T1 viewfinder, but even bigger and brighter. And it's got this cool magnet set up that it just pops on and off. And so this is really nice, and we'll be talking a lot more about it in the coming week. So this hard question somebody asked that I just wanted to mention. They want to make a 24-hour time-lapse video, but they don't know how to set the exposure. I watched your video, but it didn't really answer my question. They watched the one on how to do a time-lapse. I want to keep everything nicely exposed during the whole video. How should I do this? I'll say go to lrtimelapse.com. That guy has put together some amazing resources, but there's no... All right, here's what I would do if I wanted to just do exactly what you said. I would pick a middle ISO, pick a decent aperture, and then let my shutter speed vary. So I'd put it on aperture priority and let my shutter speed vary. But what is going to happen is, when it's darkest night, you're going to get these incredibly long shutter speeds, and you need to make sure that they don't run up against your interval for your time. And you also, by doing this, basically make day and night look the same. The exposure never changes. Your sunrise, your sunset are never visible because the light levels just stay the change, except maybe motion is going to get more and more blurred as your shutter speed gets longer. It's actually a really unexciting time lapse. The holy grail of time lapses is to capture the sunrise or the sunset, so from full bright to full dark, and let the camera adjust its exposure, but also give you a sense of what your eyeballs see as that happens.
And you do this by way of bramping, right?
Bramping.
Yeah.
Bulb ramping is where that term comes from, and you basically, because in the old days, the bulb mode, you change the bulb time slowly over the course of the exposure. Now, you can do that as a combination with a program like LR Time Lapse, which Brent wants me to talk more about, and I will probably soon, because that then allows you, it's pretty amazing, it allows you to set keyframes within images and say, use Lightroom, LR Time Lapse talks to the XML file in Lightroom and adjusts the exposure gradually over the images. And that's just a little bit of what this program can do, so that there is a gradual exposure change, and it's pretty nifty. So I just wanted to address that. The other question I had that I wanted to address was from Scott G, and says, I would like to hear a little bit about camera and lens balance, especially when we're talking about heavier lenses on Rebel series cameras. So especially when we're getting something like the T6s, which is, I think, perfectly acceptable to walk into some professional events to use to shoot. And you might want to put a really nice lens on it, like, say, for instance, here is the T5i with the Sigma 50. How's this feel? How is its lens balance?
It feels very lens heavy.
It's very lens heavy. Now this is why a lot of people who shoot with more professional lenses or heavier lenses on Rebels get a battery grip, because then your camera suddenly is turned into something like a 5D Mark III. It gives you a lot more to hold, and it becomes better balanced. It definitely, some of you out there might be thinking, well, don't you shoot mostly with one hand under the lens and the other? There is, but there's a lot of this motion going. And it really will tire your wrist quite quickly when it feels so heavy like this. And when you have more to grip and a more substantial grip, it really helps the balance. So it's certainly something you can work with, depending on the length of events you're shooting or how often you're going out and shooting, for the length of time you're going out and shooting. It can be a non-issue, but it definitely feels a little funny, and battery grips is probably the easiest way to solve that. It makes everything heavier, but it does do the balancing much better. Okay?
Okay.
You got some other questions?
I don't really. Well, Dylan asks, do you think the T6i or T6s will be good for indoor or outdoor family photos?
Yeah.
Yeah, it will.
Yep. If your budget is tight, the T6i is going to be a fine camera. I mean, the T5i is a fine camera.
Right.
It's nice. It's nice that they both have Wi-Fi built in now, and they're going to work with that base station. So that's good. I think that the big benefit of the T6s is that top LCD and the more manual control. So if you're not a person that wants to buy a camera for that, you're probably not watching this podcast if you are. But maybe the T6i, save $100. Put that $100 towards the Nifty 50, which there were rumors that we were getting a new Nifty 50 that hasn't appeared yet. Some people thought maybe it's an EFM mount for the EOS system, because they don't have many lenses native.
Otniel Valdez wants to see the T5i with the 70-200, but I think it's too far away.
It is. It is. It works. I had, we shot with the GH4, which is smaller than the T5i, with a Metabones adapter and the 100-400, and, well, you just hold the lens a lot.
Yeah.
And I have a picture somewhere of one of those in action, because I also did the Metabones adapter on the GH4 to the 2X converter to the Sigma. So you have this massive, massive lens attached to a little camera.
Bill is wondering, well, he says he's made up his mind about the 70D. I hope you use Toby Slink to buy it when you do. But he is wondering whether or not he should keep the T3i or sell it. Keep it as backup or sell it. I think you should keep it as backup.
Yep, you probably can sell it for what? Body only 300-ish, I would guesstimate, depending on what kind of condition it is. That's enough to fund a nice prime lens or a decent prime lens. I guess the question is, how terrible are you going to feel if something happens to your 70D and you have to send it in for repair for a while? Are you going to be, are you people paying you to cover stuff, or you're going on a vacation where it'd be really nice to make sure you have a camera with you? Then it might be nice to keep it around for backup. Otherwise, you know, did you have anything as backup for your T3i? A point and shoot, your cell phone camera? It's not the end of the world if you're not a professional to not have a backup. And again, that money can go towards a prime lens, or funding towards another lens, or a vacation, a road trip to use your 70D on.
Dinner.
Yeah. Or if you're feeling really generous, contact your local high school and see if their photo program, you can donate it. But then I just negated my whole argument about putting that money towards a prime. But it's a nice thing to do. Yeah.
So,
Chris wants to know the best short zoom to upgrade from an 18 to 135. Short zoom. Well, 55 to 250 STM. I don't quite know what you mean by short zoom. Oh, maybe because you mean I just did those big zooms. Yeah, 55 to 250 STM, that is a good lens, good value, lightweight, works well. That's what I would go to next. And if you want a little bit higher quality than that, the 70 to 200 f4, which is, double the money and bigger, but gives you better colors, better contrast.
Defound D wants to know, any tips on reducing grain/noise at low ISO in bright snowy landscape shots? Canon XSI 450D kit lens. You are getting grain and noise at a low ISO in bright snowy landscapes?
You should not be.
That doesn't sound right.
Now, if you are looking at it at 100%, you're going to see some noise. There's always noise in there. And at 100%, it's noisy. But if you print these or you look at them at normal sizes, it's going to be fine, I think. So that's our tip. Make sure you're getting your exposure right. Then you don't have to bring up your exposure at all.
Well, it sounds like it's bright. Sounds like the exposure is bright.
Sounds like the exposure is bright.
So,
at low
I'm not
ISOs.
sure.
Okay.
John wants to know, Sigma 18 to 300 as a general walk-around lens. He does a small travel blog where he will do sometimes close-up and wide shots, and he's thinking it might be ideal for that. And he says that he gives it the edge over the Tamron because of the dock. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, the USB dock that allows you to kind of dial in focusing a little bit better. Are we sure? I'm not positive that the 18 to 300, who said that it would be do that?
John Mayfield.
Are we sure that that lens is compatible with the dock? That's an older Sigma lens, isn't it? Because 18 to 300, 16 to 300. No, it's the new one that I just reviewed. It's the new one I just reviewed. It's a fine lens, and I'm pretty sure it is compatible with the dock. You know, if you are valuing convenience over other things, those lenses are fine to walk around and shoot with. They're good quality. The only place where it starts to get tricky is shooting in lower light conditions, and you start to zoom on those lenses. Very quickly, you find yourself at the higher ISOs. What body are you shooting with? That, you know, if it's one of these older crop sensor bodies, you're going to get some noisy pictures as you get to those longer zooms in lower light. Otherwise, sure. Hope that helped.
Oh yeah, Andrew Bailey wants to know, is the Canon 51.8 a good lens, or is it worth paying a little more for something a little bit better? That's a tough one. I'd say if you're in a super budget, stick with the 51.8. I mean, the 51.4, the Canon one, is about almost 500, so it's a big jump. And the image quality is a little bit nicer, but it's not that much nicer. So I would stay with the 51.8, or ask who was it? Mr. Awesome, nice name. Mr. Awesome said that the Yongnuo 50 f1.8 beats the Canon 50 f1.8. I'm not sure if that's the case. Is it the case?
Yeah, it seems to
Yeah.
be.
Okay.
It seems. I mean, it's not a huge difference between the two of them, and I think quality control on the Yongnuo is probably not as consistent as it is with a Canon. Say what you want about that. But if you want a portrait lens or a fun lens, $100, it's a good lens. Your other option, of course, is the Pancake, the 40 f2.8, the Shorty 40, if we want to give it its nickname. And you spend a little bit more money. You can't get quite the bokeh, but you get this tiny little lens that is very sharp, wide open, and is a little bit more versatile because it's wider. This is one of those things I go back and forth on. What if there was only one prime lens that I was going to go to a desert island with? We've actually asked that question before, I think, but so.
Wesley wants to know, are we going to keep our old website after fully launching the new site? Nope.
Nope.
We're actually working, one of the last few things on our to-do list is to do a redirect from the old website to the new website,
Yep.
so that if you have bookmarks and things like that, you'll be automatically redirected to the new website.
Yep, everything will work seamlessly. And let me tell you what, it's not much fun to make sure your content is the same at both places.
Nope.
So,
is there any need to adjust metering from evaluative nowadays, asks Chris.
That's a good question.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Your different metering modes, your average, your evaluative, your spot.
Oh, I see. And evaluative's the one that's usually...
Yeah, the one
okay.
that's sitting on.
Yes.
We rarely do.
Yeah.
But there are times.
Right. Yeah. So, I would say yes. When you are really trying to capture, well, actually, I don't really know that much about average or when you would use it, but in terms of spot metering, I use it when I'm photographing faces and I want the faces to be properly exposed or slightly overexposed, and the background is a lot different from it's maybe like 3 stops brighter than the skin, or 2 stops brighter than the skin, or a stop brighter than the skin. So when there's huge contrast in the background and whatever it is that you're trying to photograph, you might want to choose spot metering so that you set your focus point on your subject and it meters for your subject instead of for the entire frame. So that's when I might use spot metering. But I rarely ever do, and you have to be really careful because if for whatever reason you move your focus point to an area where your focus or your subject isn't, then you will have a very either under or overexposed picture depending on your settings. So, but I mean, yeah, it just kind of depends on what you're shooting.
Yeah.
And
I will say people were really hoping that there was an update to the spot metering system in the new Canons, that it would be linked to your focus point, because it's not. It's center.
Center, right.
So, I mean, you can see the value of that. You're setting up to expose for the scene. You're focusing on your white dressed bride in her wedding dress over there. You put your focus point on it and you spot meter because you want that to be exposed correctly. That's perfect. But no, what you have to do is you gotta spot meter, get your metering set up, then recompose, then focus.
Yeah.
So
So you've got to, I guess you just have to be very, very focused about what's happening in terms of the metering. Like you have to know at all times that, that you're on spot metering, keep that in mind. Which I think is just something, just another thing to worry about. While on your trips or while on a trip, how do you secure your gear in a hotel room when you're out? Trust in housekeeping ? That is from Crestapre95.
here's what we've done. We put do not disturb. I'm laughing because the room gets really messy. We put do not disturb
It's
sign on the
also
door.
environmentally conscious.
It is environmentally conscious too. I mean, we used we used towels for several days at home before washing. So, but We have put do not disturb sign on the door. Now, we both actually have think tank bags that can be locked up pretty secure, but the problem is those go with us most of the time. What gets left behind is not a whole lot, computer bits and maybe a spare body or two. And we've just done the do not disturb and hope nobody comes in. I also feel like you do have to trust a little bit. It's kind of crummy to live in a world where we're constantly in fear of all of our stuff being swiped away from people whose job it is to go into rooms, and do their job and, not steal stuff. So, yeah, do not disturb, trust people a little bit better, get a nice bag that locks up pretty securely.
Yeah, and insure your gear.
And insure your gear too. Yeah. But it's still, it's a bummer if you're on vacation, halfway through your vacation, your insurance, can't magically get you a new camera to take those beautiful pictures that you wanted to take.
Right.
Somebody asked, they got their T5i last month. Is it worth it to upgrade to the T6s? They're a videographer more than photographer, but do some photography from time to time. This is one of the questions where I can't really know until I see the sensor differences between these two, but I feel like no, it's probably not worth your time to upgrade. Put that money towards a nice prime lens. Even if this 24 megapixel sensor is an amazing step forward, and there's no indication that it is, it's just, it's an incremental step forward. You are going to give yourself better results by getting a nice lens and putting it on the camera, especially for video work.
Who was it? Does anybody use the Rogue flash bender?
We have one.
We have one, yeah. We don't use it though.
Sitting over there.
The whole idea of buying something marginally larger than the flash to modify the light just has never really...
You feel pretty strongly that it's just not enough of a difference.
Yeah.
You mean you're making your goal with these modifiers is to make the small light source bigger. And there really isn't anything practical that you can do on top of your camera to make a big difference. Now, we've had the same conversation a few mini episodes ago. We're actually kind of celebrating our 1-year anniversary of podcast mishmashness.
Really?
Yeah. I had this idea to put together this whole best of, and then I thought, I have to edit it. I watched 3 bits of 3 episodes, and I was like, this is literally going to take me forever. I'd rather just come up with new content. But we talked about this way back, and people were like, you haven't used one enough. You go outside in the dark and you put one on your camera, it's going to make a difference. And, they're not wrong, but I think our point, especially yours, is that it's not enough of a difference to matter.
Also, you have to get your flash off of the camera to make a big difference.
Yeah.
So you could try to put that on your flash and then get it off camera. Maybe that'll make a little bit of a difference. But it's so small still. It's not going to make a huge difference if it's only 50 or...
Now, some of you might be thinking, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Now, some of you might be thinking, well, you own one. How did you end up owning one? Well...
Noob tax.
It's called the noob tax. There was a time where I was like, I'm going to shoot this event, and I'm going to be outside, and I won't have anything to bounce my flash off of. I need this thing. And I used it a little bit at this event. I didn't feel like it made a big difference, and it flopped around in kind of awkward ways. And then it got put away, and I have never gotten it out again. Maybe we should give it away.
Who wants it?
A lot of people are going to say they want it. Oh, right, you can use it as a snoot. Tell us a little bit about a snoot.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you can use it as a snoot.
That's right. It does have some. The one thing about the flash bender is that it can bend around and do different things.
Well, a snoot
I'm trying to see if I see it.
is something that you use to kind of control the spill of the light. So when you take a flash like the Yongnuo or a speed light like the Yongnuo or like the Canon speed light, and you fire it, the light kind of comes out in, all kinds of directions. So it comes out straight at your subject, but it also spills to all directions to the sides of the flash. So what a snoot does is you put it or what you do with a snoot is you put it around the flash so that when you shoot it, the light goes closer, or it stays in one direction. So it controls the spill. You can use it as like a rim light, or as just to create kind of a spotlight type of the effect with the speed light, the flash. So yeah, I actually had completely forgotten you could use it as a snoot. So maybe we should keep it for that, because it could come in handy. We don't do a ton of like flash stuff, but maybe in the future it would come in handy.
Sorry, he's all fluff.
What? I know.
Chris said he is big. Did we cover everything we wanted to cover?
I think so.
Are there any more questions? What time was your phone call,
7:30.
Oh, 7:30. Plenty of time.
This is actually Bean, not Liam.
Yeah, Liam's sleeping over there.
Liam's sleeping. He's so cute.
He's fast asleep. Both cats are in here with us. It's wonderful, wonderful experience. This is supposed to be the cat-free, no cat hair zone. And you can clearly see that it's not the case. So let's talk just a moment.
Say hi,
because this is coming up. Last week we mentioned that Apple killed Aperture, and they're supposed to have their iPhoto replacement coming that's called Photos, and it all works very nicely with the whole iOS 8 ecosystem and Yosemite and iCloud. But we thought that was super delayed. No, it's not. It's in beta form. Some developers have their hands on it, and The Verge has a really nice article. So if you're interested in hearing more about it, go read the Verge article that's linked under the show notes. Now, it looks to be a more powerful iPhoto, a little bit more Aperture-like, but certainly not at the level Aperture was that gave you really nice control over RAW files and similar to Lightroom. No geotagging, and no star rating system. Did you hear that?
Huh?
No star rating system. You can just favorite pictures. So that really, I think, limits its usefulness in kind of being a serious photographer and trying to go through your images from a shoot and figuring out which ones are going to work for you. Just being able to favorite them, I use all of my stars in Lightroom, and I need all of them. And just to be able to say yes or no is not good enough for me. Also, it really nicely syncs across all of your devices. So if you're all in the Apple ecosystem, it's good. But if you're taking a lot of pictures, you're certainly going to be blowing through that 5 gigabyte free iCloud account, and you're going to have to be paying for stuff soon.
My dad just popped in. Hi, Dad. He has a question. He wants to know what software can he use to edit a video shot on a T6i using Magic Lantern. So what can he use to edit?
I just heard about that open source software, Lightworks, I think it's called. It is open source video editing, the professional editor for everyone. Now, two downsides to this is, one, open source stuff usually does not have the polish and the user interface that we get from nicer stuff. And two, the fact that it's talking about being for professionals. I think this is going to be kind of high-end and not so easy to jump into, but it's completely and totally free. My go-to recommendation on the PC side is a Sony Vegas Studio or Adobe Elements Premiere or Premiere Elements. I don't remember what order they put those in. Those two programs are decent video editors. They give you, a good bit of power without spending a ton of money on something like Adobe Premiere. On the Mac side, I use Final Cut. I like Final Cut X. I like it a lot. I never liked iMovie at all, but I know your dad is not on the Mac side. So PC, those. Anybody else in the chat room have any other suggestions? But I think those cover it. Yeah, and mentioned Magic Lantern. I still have my video. It's up. I just share it out when I haven't shared out a million other things. I discovered this week another feature that is in. I don't have the card that's in there. You can take a picture by clapping.
Oh, right. You tried that with me.
Yeah, you were excited about it.
Did not work out the way you wanted it to.
I'm a little blown away by the amount of features that Magic Lantern adds to your camera. If you right now you're looking at, you got a T5i and you're a little bummed the T6i, T6s is out, well, I was going to tell you watch my video, but it's not out yet. Wait till my video comes out. I'll put it out next week. And get yourself Magic Lantern on there, and your camera has all of these neat, fun features all of a sudden, and it's not nearly as scary as it sounds. So that's my recommendation. Our silly question at the beginning that folks probably didn't see because we're going to have to chop off all that part of the thing. I think it's this USB port. I think that's what it is. Although
that's the culprit, probably.
I'm going to say it's the culprit until we hear otherwise. The silly question was favorite meal. Because we started off saying this was going to be breakfast mishmash because of the Instagram picture I sent out earlier.
I am really hungry now.
I know. The more serious question, and remember, I want you to put this in the comments, not the chat, because I want it to stick around for people to see, is if you had to decide between a camera that gives you high megapixels or high dynamic range or great low light capabilities, excellent clean high ISO images, which would you choose? One of those three. Or maybe some other feature I'm not thinking of.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask the the food question again.
No, I did ask the food question. And
you
then
did?
I said, but the real question is.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was reading the chat.
Okay.
My brain can only focus on one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm. I think we should wrap this up. If you haven't watched my T6i, T6s, it's only 10 minutes long, much shorter than this. Go take a few moments and watch that. I don't know if I'll get a 5DS, 5DR video out. I probably will. I'll probably spend some time talking about them because I have some more thoughts. But pretty much everything I said in the rumors one that went out a week ago still holds true. If you haven't watched the critique, watch that as well. And a little promo video for some upcoming travel events. This workshop that we want you to do with us in Seattle, but if you want to travel with us in McKay Photography Academy, we have a video out about some of those trips that are coming up. There's still spots in Greece and...
Come to Greece with us.
And New Zealand.
And New Zealand.
Which is pretty amazing. We're very excited and looking forward to bringing you all kinds of information from those places. Thanks.
Everybody's shouting low light in the
Low
chat.
light.
I'm not sure.
Why aren't you all owning A7Ss? Gary's got an A7S. He loves it. It's a great camera. If I was just a general photographer and I wanted to walk outside and take some nice pictures, that A7R is mighty tempting. Put the Sony 24-70 on there, and it is a great camera combo for... I'm not going to call it affordable, but the value of that is very good. Let's wrap this up and say thank you all to everybody who's been in the chat room talking to us. We appreciate that. It makes the show much better. We get to explain what mason jars are and tell you that the cat is actually just fluffy and really not big. You hurt his feelings. He left now.
Also, he's much closer. He was much closer to you guys than us. So
right.
It was kind of an optical
I
illusion.
didn't realize that was sitting there. Yep. And I got to go get a refill on my water. So we are signing off. Thank you. Good night.
And see you guys again next week at the same time, 5:30.
That's right. Until we have, no. This is that part.
That's awkward.
Where we have to hit this stream button right there.
Is it done?